God is in everything, and we are in God. What does that say about every human being? That they're part of God. We are God. Yeah, it blurs a creator-creature distinction. It also, what happens in Genesis 3? What is the temptation that Eve succumbs to? If you eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you will be like God. So we've come back to this. Man wants to be God. So my mind is part of God's. I am holy. Basically saying that the creature is part of the Creator, blurring that distinction, and man is divine.
I am very holy. My holiness is my salvation.
Where do they get the word salvation? Where does that come from? Are we going to let them use that word? No, you can't talk about salvation if you're not dying, dead, or lost. Salvation implies that you're being saved from something. But if your mind is part of God's and you're already holy, what do you need? Yeah, exactly. What do you need to be saved from? Very good, Morgan. You need to be saved from yourself.
My salvation comes from me.
So we save ourselves, and how do we save ourselves? It's through thinking. So it ultimately comes down to mind control. And that's what comes out of so many of these New Age cults, and they are cults, is that it's your thinking shapes reality, and your thinking, and if you think your thinking can shape reality, you think that you're God. This is the height of arrogance.
Let me remember that there is no sin.
No sin. Now, last night in History of Doctrine, we were studying about how the atonement becomes attacked down through the ages. And when the atonement is misunderstood, it's because sin is minimized. It's no longer a constitutional defect, man being born spiritually dead, but sin is simply a disease. Man just doesn't do everything he could do, and so it changes the meaning of the atonement, that instead of Christ dying for you, paying the penalty for your sin, he's just giving you an example. He's saying, follow me, motivate, and that reduces the gospel to something that's no better than just another motivational feel-good speech.
Do not make the pathetic error of, quote, clinging to the old rugged cross.
Do not make the pathetic error of clinging to the old rugged cross. You don't even have to comment on that. That's pathetic, yes.
Unquote. The only message of the crucifixion is that you can overcome the cross.
So Jesus must have failed because he didn't overcome the cross. That's what that's saying. Jesus was a failure, but you can do better because you know you're God.
Have you heard of this church, or maybe its leader? Years ago, she denied Jesus is the only way.
One of the mistakes that human beings make is believing that there is only one way to live, that we don't accept that there are diverse ways of being in the world, that there are millions of ways to be a human being.
Now, how do you know that there are millions of ways? How would you respond to that? You're talking to somebody, you're talking to them on the bus, you're talking to them over the lunch table at work, or wherever you are at the gym, and somebody says, there's a million ways to God. How do you respond to that?
Scripture says there's one way.
I think we've got to go more basic than that. I think a good approach is to ask questions like, well, how do you know that? How do you know that there's a million ways to God? And ultimately, when you do get around to talking about the Scripture, how would you show that that it's consistent with the Bible that there's only one way? Well, you have John 14:6. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except by me. Is that the only place? Yeah, okay, the ark. There's only one way to survive the judgment at the time of Noah, and that was to get on the ark. How many ways were there to get on the ark? One door. Okay, what are some other biblical examples that God always has one way? Passover. There's only one way. If you applied the blood, the angel of death passed over the house, and the eldest son was not, his life was not taken. But if you did not apply the blood, then the oldest son's life was taken. What's another example? Moses with the serpent. When everybody's dying, there's because of the serpent bite, there was only one way to be delivered, to be saved, and that was to look at the serpent. What's another example? Exodus? What? The Exodus. Well, in what sense?
There was only one way out of the land, follow Moses.
Right, only one way out of the land, follow Moses, only one way through the Red Sea.
Only one way through the Red Sea. They didn't
Okay, let's stay in that whole Exodus event period. What's another example from that period that there's only one way? How many entrances are there to the tabernacle? Only one way. And what do you have to do in order to be able to go into the tabernacle? If you don't do it God's way, what happens? You die. You know, we saw that last week in Leviticus. So with Nadab and Abihu. What other examples of only one way in the Old Testament? Yeah, Tom.
Back to the ark, God only supplied one set of plans for the ark.
Only one set of plans. There's only one way to survive. Build the ark my way. Don't get too enthusiastic back there. Okay, let's keep going.
And many ways, but many paths to what you call God. And her path might be something else, and when she gets there, she might...
Okay, what did you just hear? A lie? To what you call God. See, we're going to... Wait a minute, where do we get our definition of deity here? Where does this come from?
Call it the light, but her loving and her kindness and her generosity brings her, if it brings her to the same point that it brings you, it doesn't matter whether she called it God along the way or not.
Now, I know this, I can just keep, it's, where do you get concepts of love and generosity and kindness? Without somehow stealing this from the Bible. Because these are not virtues that are developed in other world religions. Now, by the time you get into Greek philosophy, they start developing some of these things. But in the early Babylonian pantheistic religions and some of this isn't there. Certainly not there in your Native American religions. Moctezuma and the Aztecs weren't real loving to the other Indians in South America. They enjoyed sacrificing them to the gods, but that was not what we'd call loving.
I guess the danger that could be in that, I mean, it sounds great on the onset, but if you really look at both sides,
There couldn't possibly be just one way. What about Jesus? What about Jesus?
You say there isn't only one way. There is one way and only one way, and that is through Jesus.
There couldn't possibly be with
Because
the
you
millions of people
say
in the
there
world.
isn't.
There couldn't possibly be.
Today, she has turned her millions of adoring fans over to New Age doctrine. Christians are letting this into their homes and are being deceived.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome to week number 3 of our New Earth web class. And again, I thank you. Eckhart Tolle thanks you for joining us as we bring students and seekers.
New Earth web class. Where does this come from, this idea we're bringing in a new earth?